Hi everyone. So, just before I start, sorry it took me a couple of days. I have been doing other things, but here I am, eating a cookie. The second thing is if you hear some laughter and cheers, like from my environment, that's because the pub that's across the street is like very active right now. It's actually like, if I wasn't so old and tired, like I would totally want to go over there because it seems like it's like people are having fun over there. It's like when you were a little kid and you like, your parents were maybe having a party like in the living room and you had to like go into your room and go to bed, but you could like hear the laughter and stuff down the hall. That's kind of how I feel. So I kind of have FOMO at the same time. I'm like, oh, I'm way too tired to go. But I do not want to leave you for another day without my next installment. So here's my next installment. I have to remember where I was. Oh yeah, so Fafford just named the little beggar. Did he not name her yet? He did not name her yet. He was trying to get Fafford to like go along with Pulg's thing. Fafford won't. So he has taken the beggar girl under his wing. And then, despite the wash my hands of you tone of this last whisper, the last whisper was, farewell, death seeker. Despite the wash my hands of you tone of this last whisper, the Grey Mouser did what he could to put off the evil night of reckoning, devising more pressing tasks for Pulg's bullies, and alleging that this or that omen was against the immediate settling of the Wadras account. For Pulg, alongside his pink streak of sentimentality, had recently taken to sporting a grey one of superstition. Right, that was the last thing we read. There would have been no insurmountable problem at all, of course, if Wadras had only had that touch of realism about money matters that, when a true crisis arises, is almost invariably shown by even the fattest, greediest priest or the skinniest, most unworldly holy man. But Wadras was stubborn. It was probably, as we have hinted, the sole remaining symptom, though a most inconvenient one, of his only seemingly cast-off senility. Not one rusty iron tick, the smallest coin of Lankhmar, would he pay to extortioners. Such was Wadras' boast. To make matters worse, if that were possible, he would not even spend money renting gaudy furniture or temple space for Isik, as was practically mandatory for gods progressing up the central stretch of the street. Instead, he averred that every tick collected, every bronze egol, every silver smerduk, every gold rill, yes, every diamond in amber glulditch would be saved to buy for Isik the finest temple at the Citadel and, in fact, the Temple of Arth, the invisible all-listener, accounted one of the most ancient and powerful of all the gods in Lankhmar. Naturally, this insane challenge, thrown out for all to hear, had the effect of still further increasing Isik's popularity and swelled its congregations with all sorts of folk who came, at first at least, purely as curiosity seekers. The odds on how far Isik would get up the street, how soon, for they regularly bet on such things in Lankhmar, began to switch wildly up and down as the affair got quite beyond the shrewd but essentially limited imaginations of bookmakers. Wadras took to sleeping curled in the gutter around Isik's coffer, first an old garlic bag, later a small stout cask with a slit in the top for coins, and with Fafford curled around him. Only one of them slept at a time, the other rested but kept watch. At one point, the Mouser almost decided to slit Wadras' throat as the only possible way out of his dilemma, but he knew that such an act would be the one unforgivable crime against his new profession. It would be bad for business and certain to ruin for him forever with Pulg and all other extortioners, if ever traced to him, even in faintest suspicion. Wadras must be roughed up if necessary, yes, even tortured, but at the same time he must be treated in all ways as a goose who laid golden eggs. Moreover, the Mouser had had a presentiment that putting Wadras out of the way would not stop Isik. Not while Isik had Fafford. What finally brought the affair to a head, or rather to its first had enforced the Mouser's hand was the inescapable realization that if he held off any longer from putting the bite on Boadres for Pulg, then the rival extortioners, one Basharat in particular, would do it on their own account. As the number one racketeer of religions in Lankhmar, Pulg certainly had first grab, but if he delayed for an unreasonable length of time in making it, no matter on what grounds of omens or arguments, but flattening the sacrifice, then Boadres... Fattening the sacrifice, right? It should be fattening the sacrifice. Don't you think it should be fattening the sacrifice? Anyway. Then Boadres was anybody's victim, Basharat's in particular, as Pulg's chief rival. So, it came about, as it so often does, that the Mouser's efforts to avert the evil nightfall only made it darker and stormier when it finally came down. At last, the penultimate evening did arrive, signalized by a final warning sent Pulg by Basharat the Mouser, who had been hoping all along for some wonderful last-minute inspiration that never came and took what may seem to some a coward's way out. Making use of the beggar girl, whom he had named Lily Black, and certain other of his creatures, he circulated a rumor that the treasurer of the Temple of Arth was prevented to decamp in a rented black sloop across the inner sea, taking with him all funds and temple valuables, including a set of black pearl-crusted altar furnishings, gift of the wife of the High Overlord, on which the split had not yet been made with Pulg. He timed the rumor just so it returned to him by unimpeachable channels just after he had set out for Issek's spot with 4 well-armed bullies. It may be noted in passing that Arth's treasurer actually was in monetary hot waters and really had rented a black sloop, which proved not only that the Mouser used good sound fabric for his fabrications, but also that Boadres had by landlords and bankers' standards made a very sound choice in selecting Issek's temple to be, whether by chance or by some strange shrewdness co-dwelling with his senile stubbornness. The Mouser could not divert his whole expeditionary force, for Boadres must be saved from Basharat. However, he was able to split it with almost certain knowledge that Pulg would consider his action the best strategy available at the moment. 3 of the bullies he sent on with firm instructions to bring Boadres to account, while he himself raced off with a minimum guard to intercept the supposedly fleeing and loot-encumbered treasurer. Of course, the Mouser could have made himself part of the Boadres party, but that would have meant he would have had personally to best Fafford, or be bested by him, and while the Mouser wanted to do everything possible for his friend, he wanted to do just a little bit more than that, he thought, for his own security. Some, as we have suggested, may think in then taking this way out, the Grey Mouser was throwing his friend to the wolves. However, it must be always remembered that the Mouser knew Fafford. The 3 bullies, who did not know Fafford, and the Mouser had selected them for that reason, were pleased with the turn of events. An independent commission always meant the chance of some brilliant achievement, and so perhaps of promotion. They waited for the first break between services, when there was inevitably considerable passing about and jostling. Then one, with a small axe in his belt, went straight for Boadres and his cask, which the holy man also used as altar, draping it for the purpose with the sacred garlic bag. Another drew sword and menaced Fafford, keeping sound distance from and careful watch on the giant. The third, adopting the jesting, rough-and-ready manner of the master of the show at a bawdy house, spoke ringing warnings to the crowd and kept a reasonably watchful eye on them. The folk of Lankhmar are so bound by tradition that it was unthinkable that they would interfere with any activities as legitimate as those of an extortioner, the number one extortioner too, even in defense of a most favored priest. But there are occasional foreigners or madmen to be dealt with, though in Lankhmar even the madmen generally respect the traditions. No one in the congregation saw the crucial thing that happened next, for their eyes were all on the first bully, who was likely choking Boadres with one hand while pointing his axe at the cask with the other. There was a cry of surprise and a clatter. The second bully lunged forward towards Fafford, had dropped his sword and was shaking his hand as if it pained him. Without haste, Fafford picked him up by the slack of his garments between his shoulder blades, reached the first bully in 2 giant strides, slapped the axe from his hand, and picked him up likewise. It was an impressive sight. The giant, gaunt-cheeked, bearded acolyte wearing his long robe of undyed camel's hair, recent gift of a votary, and standing with knees bent and feet wide planted as he held aloft to either side a squirming bully. But although indeed a most impressive tableau, it presented a made-to-order opening for the third bully, who instantly unsheathed his scimitar and, with an acrobat's smile and wave to the crowd, lunged toward the apex of the obtuse angle formed by the juncture of Fafford's legs. The crowd shuddered and squealed with the thought of the poignancy of the blow. There was a muffled thud. The third bully dropped his sword. Without changing his stance, Fafford swept together the two bullies he was holding so their heads met with a loud thunk. With an equally measured movement, he swept them apart again and sent them sprawling to either side, unconscious among the onlookers. Then, stepping forward, still without seeming haste, he picked up the third bully by neck and crotch and pitched him a considerably greater distance into the crowd, where he bowled over two of Basharat's henchmen who had been watching the proceedings with great interest. There was absolute silence for 3 heartbeats. Then the crowd applauded rapturously. While the tradition-bound Lankhmarian thought it highly proper for extortioners to extort, they also considered it completely in character for a strange acolyte to work miracles, and they never omitted to clap a good performance. Boisdress, fingering his throat and still gasping a little, smiled with simple pleasure when Fafford finally acknowledged the applause by dropping down cross-legged to the cobbles and bowing his head. The old priest launched instantly into a sermon in which he further electrified the crowd by several times hinting that, in the celestial realms, Isaac was preparing to visit Lankhmar in person. His acolytes' routing of the 3 evil men Boisdress attributed to the inspiration of Isaac's might, to be interpreted as a sort of foretaste of the gods' approaching reincarnation. The most significant consequence of this victory, the doves over the hawks, was a little midnight conference. The most significant consequence of this victory of the doves over the hawks was a little midnight conference in the back room of the Inn of the Silver Eel, where Pulg first warmly praised, then coolly castigated the Grey Mouser. He praised the Mouser for intercepting the treasure of Arth, who it turned out had just been embarking on the Black Sloop, not to flee Lankhmar, though, but only to spend a water-guarded weekend with several riotous companions and one Ilala, high priestess of the goddess of the same name. However, he had actually taken along several of the black pearl-crusted altar furnishings, apparently as a gift for the high priestess, and the Mouser very properly confiscated them before wishing the holy band the most exquisite of pleasures on their holiday. Pulg judged the Mouser's loot amounted to just about twice the usual cut, which seemed a reasonable figure to cover the treasurer's irregularity. He rebuked the Mouser for failing to warn the 3 bullies about Fafford and omitting to instruct them in detail on how to deal with the giant. "They're your boys, son, and I judge you by their performance," Pulg told the Mouser in fatherly, matter-of-fact tones. "To me, if they stumble, you flop. You know this northerner well, son. You should have had them trained to meet his slights. You solved your main problem well, but you slipped on an important detail. I expect good strategy from my lieutenants, but I demand flawless tactics." The Mouser bowed his head. "You and this northerner were comrades once," Pulg continued. He leaned forward across the dinted table and drew down his lower lip. "You're not still soft on him, are you, son?" The Mouser arched his eyebrows, flared his nostrils, and slowly swung his face from side to side. Pulg thoughtfully scratched his nose. "So we come tomorrow night," he said. "Must make an example at Boisdress, an example that will stick like mingle glue. I suggest having Grilly hamstring the northerner at the first onset. Can't kill him, he's the one who brings the money, but with ankle tendons cut, he could still stomp around on his hands and knees and be in some ways an even better drawing card. How's that sound to you?" The Mouser slitted his eyes and thought for 3 breaths. Then, "Bad," he said boldly. It gripes me to admit it, but this northerner sometimes conjures up battle sleights and even I can't be sure of countering. Crazy berserk tricks born of sudden whim that no civilized man can anticipate. Chances are Grilly could nick him, but what if he didn't? Here's my read. It lets you rightly think that I may still be soft on the man, but I give it because it's my best read. Let me get him drunk at nightfall. Dead drunk. Then he's out of the way for certain. Pulg growled. Sure you can deliver on that, son? They say he's forsworn booze, and he sticks to waters like a giant squid. I can detach him, the master said, and this way we don't risk spoiling him from Wadra's show. Battle's always uncertain. You may plan to hawk a man and have to cut his throat. Pulg shook his head. We also leave him fit to tangle with our collectors the next time they come for the cash. Can't get him drunk every time we pick up the split. Too complicated. And looks very weak. No need to, the master said confidently. Once Wadra starts paying, the northerner will go along. Pulg continued to shake his head. You're guessing, son, he said. Oh, to the best of your ability, but still guessing. I want this deal backed up strongly. An example that will stick, I said. Remember, son, this man we're really putting on the show for tomorrow night is Basharat. He'll be there. You can bet on it, though, standing in the last row, I imagine. Did you hear how your northerner dumped 2 of his boys? I like that. He grinned widely, then instantly grew serious again. So we'll do it my way, eh? Grilly's very sure. The master shrugged once, deadpan. If you say so. Of course, some northerners suicide when crippled. I don't think he would, but he might. Still, even allowing for that, I'd say your plan has 4 chances in 5 of working out perfectly. 4 in 5. Pulg frowned furiously, his rather piggy, red-rimmed eyes fixed on the mouser. Finally, he said, Sure you can get him drunk, son? 5 in 5? I can do it, the master said. He had thought of a half-dozen additional arguments in favor of his plan, but he did not utter them. He did not even add 6 in 6 as he was tempted to. He was learning. Pulg suddenly leaned back in his chair and laughed, sighing that business part of their conference was over. He tweaked the naked girl standing beside him. Wine, he ordered. No, not that sugary slop I keep for customers. Didn't Zizzy instruct you? The real stuff from behind the green idol. Come, son, pledge me a cup. Then tell me a little about this Isaac. I'm interested in him. I'm interested in them all. He waved loosely at the darkly gleaming shelves of religious curios and handsomely carved traveling case rising beyond the end of the table. He frowned a very different frown from his business one. There are more things in this world than we understand, he said sententiously. Did you know that, son? The great man shook his head, again very differently. He was swiftly sinking into his most deeply metaphysical mood. Makes me wonder sometimes. You and I, son, know that these, he waved again at the case, are toys. But the feelings that men have toward them, they're real, eh? And they can be strange. Easy to understand part of those feelings. Brats shivering at bogies, fools gawking at a show and hoping for blood or a bit of undressing. But there's another part that's strange. The priests bray nonsense, the people groan and pray, and something comes into existence. I don't know what that something is. I wish I did, I think. But it's strange. He shook his head. Makes any man wonder. So, drink your wine, son. Watch his cup, girl, and don't let it empty. Talk to me about Isaac. I'm interested in them all, but right now, I'd like to hear about him. He did not in any way hint that for the past 2 months he'd been watching the services of Isaac for at least 5 nights a week from behind a veiled window in various lightless rooms along the Street of the Gods, and that was something that not even the Mouser knew about Pulg.